Today we are talking about gut health. We had such a big viewage from Dr. Henss on episode 1. If you hadn't had a chance to watch that, please go back and watch episode 1. That we're doing a continuation here now on episode 3. Welcome to World Changers, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of those who are making a difference one step at a time. From entrepreneurs to activists, scientists to spiritual leaders, we explore the journeys of individuals who are shaping our world for the better. Join us as we uncover the inspiration, challenges, and triumphs behind their remarkable contributions. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered to change the world. This is World Changers. Dr. Bryan Henss has successfully owned and operated one of the biggest health and wellness chiropractic centers in Dallas-Fort Worth for over 10 years. He graduated from Illinois College in 2009 and Logan University in 2013. He then went on to receive additional training and certifications in spinal correction, detoxification, nutrition, and exercise before owning his own clinic in 2014. Dr. Bryan has helped thousands of local residents get their health back on track with testimonies ranging from relief of severe back pain, migraines, infertility issues, weight loss, and ear infections, autoimmune disease, and so much more. He has made no claim to curing any of these, though he simply helps the patient's body to restore natural health and healing the way that God intended. Welcome back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You were such a hit for episode 1.
I got to give credit to the host.
No. So today we're going to talk about gut health.
Yep.
We had several people who commented they'd love to learn more about gut health. And so that's what we're diving into today and what the importance of gut health is.
Yeah. With gut health, it's like, why would you spend a whole episode talking specifically about gut health? But when you understand the way that the gut interacts with every other part of our body, every other system, hormones, our immune system, everything is affected by the gut. And so when you can take a look at that and just say, hey, look, we always talk about getting to the root cause in the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
With our patients, what's going on with your health that you're worried about and what's the underlying root cause of that problem? And so when we understand how intricately the gut is tied to everything else, you start to realize, and we see it, we have all kinds of science and everything behind it now to support that, but that the health of your gut affects everything. And so we've really got to figure out, how do we identify the problems, because there's a multitude of things that can go wrong with the gut.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, hey, here's a generic, slap a Band-Aid type thing of a one size fits all. Here's how you fix the gut. Because there can be a lot of different things that are happening. Foundationally, it comes from similar areas most of the time. When we look at how do we get to a place where we have a gut that isn't functioning well, but you've really got to dive into that, and that's why we do testing, and that's why we talk about a lot of things. So we'll talk about some stuff today, but ultimately, every patient is still unique,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got to figure out what is their unique situation. Hopefully, we can give some people some guidance, offer some recommendations to get them moving in the right direction, and how to go about finding, people that can help them, again, get to the real root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you're watching the show, if you have some questions that pop up, feel free to put them in the comments and we'll address them after the show, or maybe even up on the next show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
So gut health affects so many people and so many other problems. And from what I've showed, not only being in your office, but learning about gut health and wellness on my own, it's really kind of the root cause of a lot of things.
Yeah. A lot of, some people have been quoted as saying, I forget who initially said this, but it's been shared many times, is, the the health of the gut is the root cause of all disease or chronic disease. And I think to a degree, there's truth to that. There are multiple factors. What we see is that the gut is a common denominator in a lot of things. And so if you really want to understand that, I mean, we can talk about how the gut affects hormones. We can talk about how it affects your immune system. We can talk about how it affects your metabolic pathways, like your ability to produce energy. As some of those things break down, then it affects your sleep cycle, right? Your neurotransmitters. So like serotonin, for instance, majority of your serotonin is made in the gut. That's your happy hormone. So mood, like literally anxiety and depression and sleep disorders, right? Affected by whether or not your gut is healthy. And so it's not just like, hey, do I have a tummy ache, right? There's a lot more to it than that. And so if you really want to understand that well, you've got to go all the way back to the beginning. Like, how does this stuff happen? Where do we end up with gut dysfunctions?
Well, and I think a lot of it's misconception. A lot of people think you have bad gut if you're overweight. And that's not necessarily the case either.
Yeah, for sure.
I could be 100 pounds and my gut still be all kinds of out of whack.
Oh, there's all kinds of skinny, sick people, you know. A lot of, we have this weird, and maybe it's because it's such a prevalent problem in America of overweight and obesity. But we kind of think that if you're not overweight, then you're probably pretty healthy. And there's plenty of sick people. I mean, look at people with, there's plenty of chronic autoimmune conditions, cancers, et cetera, where these people are frail and thin and unwell. But it's not what we tend to think of as being unhealthy. And so, we've got to shift our mindset there just a little bit. It's not just, I tell patients, even when they want to lose weight, I go, look, it's not about the number on the scale. It's not just about losing weight or looking good in the mirror. It's about being healthy. Are you healthy? Are you physically fit? And that doesn't necessarily mean weight. Fitness is more important than fatness, is what we say. And so
I like that.
It's all about getting well, and that can come in a little bit different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, everybody's healthy is going to look different.
For sure. And so if we really go back, like, okay, how do we end up with these gut dysfunctions in the first place, right? Things like leaky gut and so on. If we go all the way back to the beginning, how do we screw this up? Why is it so prevalent in America? Well, it starts at birth. It starts from the minute we're born. And so, and again, I learned a lot of this stuff just having kids, it wasn't things we learned in school necessarily. It was going through this process of having children, going through natural labor and delivery classes that we went to and so on. None of my kids were born in the hospital. They're all born outside the hospital.
Okay.
And so going through that process, you start learning all these intricacies of the natural birth process and how it's amazingly complex, and yet it's so simple. That's just the way it was designed to work. And so for starters, just going through the birth canal, a natural delivery versus a C-section, which C-sections have skyrocketed in this country in the last like 30 or 40 years. And it's starting to course correct a little bit.
Because C-section should just be for if there's an emergency or the baby's turned wrong.
Yeah, there's a real reason. I think it's
now almost like an option. Which would you rather have?
Yeah. And it's become we've taken something that is a natural process, giving birth, right? Our women's bodies are designed to do it, right? And we've turned it into a medical procedure. It is no longer something that just happens when it's supposed to happen. We calculate, we time it, we this, we that. And if the timing's not convenient, very much. And if the timing's not convenient, then we say, well, we'll just plan a C-section. Like, God forbid your baby's due on Thanksgiving or Christmas, right? We'll just cut the baby out of the womb a few days early. You know what happens almost exclusively? I shouldn't say exclusively in the sense of it doesn't happen in other situations, but it's almost a guarantee. That's a better word. For a baby who's induced or taken early, jaundice, because they're not fully developed. Every
so
baby I know
friends,
Go ahead.
So many babies now have jaundice, and now I understand why.
Every baby that I've personally interacted with, whether it's friends, family members, patients, etc., where mom was induced or the baby was taken prior, just taken C-section, planned C-section, almost 100% jaundice babies. And it's like, well, yeah, they weren't done developing. Like, they know when to come out. The body knows when the baby should be born. And for us to play God and be like, well, no, that's not convenient. You can't go past this date and time, which is all a guesstimate anyways, right? Like delivery due dates, they're all a best guesstimate, right? And so we never can be definitive on that. And so we always end up, we create these problems from the get-go. And so going through, excuse me, going through the birth canal is actually where a lot of people understand gut bacteria, good gut bacteria. That's where we get our first dose of good gut bacteria. It's just the natural flora in the birth canal. So when a baby comes through the birth canal, they actually will take a big gulp of fluids coming through the birth canal. And that's the natural God-intended inoculation that occurs. And then it's really neat. So again, this isn't a birthing class, but like then when baby goes through the birth canal and they'll actually spin, so the head comes out and then they'll spin 90 degrees so the shoulders can come out better. They spin 90 degrees, and then when they get through the abdomen, it actually squeezes them, and they spit most of the stuff back out so they don't have all that fluid in them, but the inoculation has occurred.
Wow.
And now the bacteria starts to grow and develop and replicate, and that's where we get our good bacteria. The bacteria helps us in a ton of ways. Number one, it helps us break down our food. It's a big part of just proper digestion. We can't get the key nutrients out of our food unless we break it down into its most basic building blocks. So we've got to be able to digest. Number two, the bacteria talks to our immune system. The bacteria is a portion of the immune system. 70% of your immune system is housed in the gut. And so when you tear up the gut, right, then you end up with an immune system that doesn't respond properly, so chronic colds, flus, etc., right? Or you end up with an autoimmune type condition later on in life if it progresses to that point later.
Now, have you ever seen a connection, or maybe you've never, I'm sure you've thought about this, to so many kids these days you see have allergies to everything.
Oh, for
foods,
sure.
Milk, all the things. I wonder if there's a correlation between, or a lot of these kids with all these allergies born through C-section.
It's a great question. And I haven't necessarily seen a direct, like I haven't seen science or data on that. I won't say that's a definitive.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do know is the more we interfere with the natural order of things, the worse we get.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, like you think about, again, this good bacteria that we're supposed to have and the proper digestion and so on that it comes with that and the proper immune response that comes with that. And then all of a sudden we've got these allergies to things that we've eaten for, all of human history. Right. It's funny. I like to laugh when people get into the nutrition conversation. They go, oh, well, humans shouldn't consume dairy products because milk is really the baby food for baby cows. You see these people write this stuff online, right? And I kind of laugh at that and I go, yeah, but my Bible talks about the land of milk and honey, right? And so I'm like, I'm pretty sure throughout human history we've been able to consume dairy. Mm-hmm. The problem is, again, we've gotten so far off track. So I think some of the allergy issues, again, there's an immune issue for sure. This gut dysfunction absolutely is a contributor. I think there's some other things that contribute to that as well, where there's certain aspects of pharmaceuticals, vaccines, et cetera, where we're using these other products in the making of that. And so now let's say you're using some sort of bovine serum. This is a common ingredient. Using bovine serum to make a vaccine, for instance. And what happens is they use that to as like a medium for growing the virus or whatever they're trying to make the shot for. Well, now instead of consuming this bovine product, whether that's meat or a dairy product, right, orally through your gut, we're injecting it directly into the bloodstream. Well, it's a totally different way to interact with that product. And so now we've got a different immune response to that. The same thing is true. Like I said, there's peanut allergies and all these, they're through the roof. When I was a kid, you rarely saw a dairy allergy. You rarely saw a peanut allergy. Yeah. Now it's like you're not allowed to have tree nuts in a public school because so many kids are allergic to this stuff. We're really cautious about eggs and dairy. Same thing, there's eggs and different things that get mixed into in various ways into this process of producing these products. And so now we're introducing that into these babies, right, in a totally unnatural format.
Who don't have a strong immune system to start.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's even if they're born naturally, right? They still don't have they get their immune system from mom.
Yeah.
Right. So then that takes us to step 2. So we get this newborn baby who, let's say, potentially is born unnaturally. And then we may or may not breastfeed. right? And we're running into more and more people. And again, I think the tides are turning on this, which is good. But there was a season there in history, in recent history, where a lot of moms weren't breastfeeding, whether that was out of convenience or whatever. And there's no judgment there, like on all of this, right? Just to be clear, like I have these conversations with new moms and moms who bring their 5, 10, 15-year-old children into the office all the time. And I'm asking all of these questions. And I always say, look, there's no judgment. Whatever's done is done. I believe that most mothers, if not all, as long as you're a decent mother who loves their child, right, you're doing the best you can. You're making the best decision.
Yeah, whether you can or you can't, or you do or you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, and there's situations where it's like, hey, maybe mom wasn't that well, and she can't, the milk production doesn't come in or whatever. And so there's definitely instances for that. But in general, we jump to these formulas too frequently. And then if you look at the ingredients on the formula, it's vegetable oils and sugars and these things
that they're telling adults not to have.
Yeah, they're just terrible for us, right? And it's the majority of what's in these products. And so if you have to do a formula, there are some better ones out there, but you've got to really look at the ingredients and where it's coming from and so on. And it should be clean, it shouldn't have these, again, vegetable oil's cheap. That's why we use it. But it's also incredibly pro-inflammatory.
I'm pretty sure we talked about it on episode 1, vegetable oil, and how it used to be in everyone's household, and now people are getting away from it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we did touch base on that. And so it's more and more people, again, waking up to this reality that these seed oils is kind of the term that's become a little bit more mainstream is so bad for us. It's highly, highly, highly processed. I actually was again, always trying to stay up on this stuff and research and learn more. And not that long ago, I was reading up, and this, I forget who the presenter was, but he was talking about the history of where these seed oils came from. And he's like, look, Rockefeller created this stuff, decades ago. It's a byproduct. It's engine lubricant is really what it ought to be used for. It makes great lubricant for, your machinery, right? It doesn't make good nutrition. And so the highest caloric intake that we get in our society today, the majority of our calories come from seed oils. They're incredibly, so back to the basic here is like they're incredibly pro-inflammatory. So you don't put the right gut bacteria in, then we may or may not be breastfeeding. And if we're not, or we're splitting it a little bit and we jump to this formula, in most cases, we're putting a pro-inflammatory vegetable oil in a baby's gut, and the baby's still growing and developing. So now we've got an imbalanced gut bacteria. We're already creating inflammation. And then what happens to these kids? Now we start
Vaccines.
with, yeah, right. So we start, hey, we've got to get this stuff, we got to prevent all these diseases, right? And so we started vaccinating them the minute they're born. Why we're putting injectables in, and what happens when the kids get sick, antibiotics and so on and so forth, right? And so from the minute they're born, there's this onslaught of chemicals and toxins and interferences that get pumped into their body. And then we're like shocked that we've got chronic ear infections and colic and allergies and immune system issues and so on from these kids. And then as they grow, what do? We just keep piling on, right? We're getting, there's you look at the vaccine schedule for kids 30 plus years ago versus today, and it's like doubled or tripled, right? It's like, well, if all of that is necessary for our survival, how did we make it
exactly
as a society up until just a few years ago? And this is a hot topic. People are going to watch this. You're going to get some comments. People are going to hate that we're even talking about this or even mentioning it. I'm like, but no one that I know that's ever really dug into the research doesn't come to a similar conclusion that we're overdoing it. When it comes to our children and our health, we're the most heavily vaccinated society on the planet, yet we've got the highest rates of chronic disease. Now, correlation doesn't equal causation, but it ought to be looked at, and it's not. Nobody's willing to look at it. The people that question it are belittled and called quacks and so on and so forth. But when I dig in and I present the data, nobody can argue with it. And so, again, that's not today's total topic, but it is a major contributor, I believe.
Absolutely.
You look at kids on the autism spectrum, right? And so, again, a chronic life-altering problem, right? A neurodevelopmental problem. Gut health, almost 100% of the time, is a major problem for these kids. And when you start healing their gut, you see their mental health start to change, right? And so we know, again, talking about where does the gut affect? It affects everything. the gut-brain connection is huge. Simple example, the way I always show people how closely the brain and gut are connected is like, think about when someone consumes alcohol, right? How quickly does it affect their brain, right? Couple of drinks in a short period of time, and you've got quick cognitive changes very, very quickly. It doesn't take much. And that's because the brain and the gut are so closely connected.
What affects your brain before you can even trace it in the blood? Am I right?
Maybe. I don't know.
So. I think
you might be able to. I mean, you might be able to see cognitive change to, to some degree before we can even show that it's in your bloodstream all the way. That'd be a good.
I think that'd be
good.
I don't know for a fact, but I think that I'm going to. But I think
I'm gonna default to Dr. Arinn on that and say you're probably right. So we know there's a really close connection there, is the point, right? And so, how does some of that happen? Well, part of that is when it comes to neurohealth, right? You look at a kid who's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. You look at a kid with anxiety, depression, focus issues, right? Their neurotransmitters are all screwed up. Well, serotonin, I believe it's 70% of our serotonin is made in the gut, right? Which is your happy hormone. This is your neurotransmitter that tells you life is good, right? This is the neurotransmitter that you respond to when someone you love walks into the room. It's your serotonin, right? What do we give these kids then? We give them SSRIs, right? Am I saying that right? Selective serotonin uptake inhibitors. There we go.
Good job.
So SSRIs, what are we doing? We're saying, well, you're not making enough serotonin. So instead of your body processing it and recycling it, we're going to block that process. So the serotonin will stay in circulation.
Which actually makes no sense at all.
Which then, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You end up with more problems, right? And so again, whole nother topic there. But again, so gut health, right? If we don't have a healthy gut, we don't make the neurotransmitters that actually help us to enjoy life.
Well, and they even say, like, as adults, like if you're trying to go build muscle or you want to go be an athlete or you just want to get in better shape, that you got 3 steps really. First, cleanse, balance, build.
Yeah.
Well, how do you balance or build if you're not cleansed first?
Right.
I feel like so many people now take these new supplements, or they jump, I call them like grasshoppers. They jump from supplement to supplement or protein shake to protein shake, and they really don't see all the benefits they could be getting because ultimately they need to cleanse their gut first.
Yeah.
Your body can't fully take in all the nutrients or anything else or vitamins we're taking in if you have a gut problem.
Yeah.
So it can't absorb it first if we're not cleansing first.
Right? Yeah. And so that kind of leads us to talking about leaky gut, which is kind of the first step for a lot of these problems.
Now, I know when I first came to office, I had no idea what leaky gut even meant.
Yeah.
So let's first define that.
And so in simple terms, leaky gut is your gut lining is permeable, meaning things are supposed to be able to pass through it. That's where we absorb, right? And so when we say gut, we don't just mean like your stomach. We mean like your whole digestive tract. And so it's permeable. We absorb water through our gut lining. We absorb all the key nutrients, right? Our macro and micronutrients all get broken down in the digestive tract and then absorbed in the appropriate time and place and so on and so forth. Leaky gut basically is what it sounds like. The gut has become more permeable than it should be. So now, instead of things getting properly digested and making their way into the gut, things are partially digested in essence. And it's kind of an oversimplification, but things aren't getting broken down like they should be. And things that the body might normally reject and say, that's not actually something we want to absorb. We just want to pass that right through, right? In the front door and out the back door, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Now those things are making their way in. And so we're getting these pro-inflammatory things into our body in manners that, again, they weren't intended. And so what leads to the leaky gut? Again, good gut bacteria from birth, right? Toxins have a ton to do with that. So again, the vegetable oils, the over-medication that we have in our society today. Then we start adding in things like additives, preservatives, food dyes. These things cause damage and inflammation to the gut. Antibiotics, right? So we're put on, so many kids get put on antibiotics, which again, let's assume you had decent gut bacteria to begin with. Let's say natural delivery, everything went great. You're eating good, clean dairy products as a kid. You nursed all these things, right? That help give us the best possible gut bacteria. But you get put on antibiotics a half a dozen times, before you're, 15 or 18 years old.
Compromised and you can't find it.
Exactly. And you start to tear up that gut flora. You start damaging that, depleting that. And so now we've got this whole imbalance in there. And so then you add stress to that. I don't know if you're stressed at all.
I never deal with stress.
In today's world, who's stressed, right?
What's that even mean?
And so, right. You're like, why? It's a non-issue because there's nothing we can do about it, right? That's what a lot of people think.
I get adjusted on a regular. I don't deal with
There you go. Exactly. And so we've got that problem, right, of just what life is throwing us. And kids, again, you look at kids, all right, it starts at a young age. Kids are more stressed today than they've ever been because it used to be, you would go to school, and if you didn't get along with somebody or you had a bad day or there was a thing at school with a group of kids, you went home and now you're home with your family. And now with social media and things like this, it's like you never detach. It's like every moment of the day you have the opportunity to be stressed out about whatever else.
Well, and even the family life from generations ago to now.
For sure.
It's almost non-existent. It's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same at all. And so all these stressors actually, people talk about like, I carry my stress in my shoulders or something like that. Or I remember
you actually carry it in your gut.
Yeah. I remember my mom talking about having an ulcer. And I was like, what? When I was a kid. And I was like, what causes that? And she basically just told me it was stress, right? And there's a multitude of factors, again, that can contribute, but stress is one of them. And we have to acknowledge that because it changes our hormones and our neurotransmitters and everything. Our body's constantly adapting to that. And so all of these factors start piling up, and then you've got this gut that's just not doing its job anymore. It's not interacting with your immune system like it should. It's not producing the hormones and neurotransmitters that it should. It's not digesting and absorbing the nutrients like it should and rejecting the junk like it should. So we're not getting the right nutrition in, which a lot of that has to do with what we put in our mouth, right? Again, whole nother topic we could talk about. But now we've got this whole cascade. So we've got an immune system that doesn't work. We don't have a happy brain because we're not getting the right neurotransmitters. And that creates this vicious cycle of stress, right? And chronic sickness and colds and flus and ear infections and so on, which adds to more stress, which keeps this cycle going and going and going.
And if all you're doing is trying to pour in antibiotics to try to fix this cycle,
you're going
to stay in the cycle.
Exactly.
Or eventually something else, heaven forbid, is going to build up from it.
And so again, oftentimes their patients come in and they've got a history of cancer, they've got an autoimmune condition, etc. I'm like, I don't know where it came from. You don't have a family history, etc. And if we really dig into their history, you're like, well, this is the exact cascade of events. You didn't wake up one morning and you got struck with an autoimmune condition or cancer.
Well, like going back to episode 1, cancer doesn't happen overnight.
Exactly.
What is it you said?
In most cases, it's 8 to 10 years of cancer cell growth before we're able to detect it. In most cases, not all. And so again, we have this whole process that starts from birth, and then it only gets worse as we get older because again, stressors get worse. We get busy, so we eat worse, and so on. Processed foods, we've got more artificial ingredients allowed in our food supply here in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world. There are thousands of chemicals that we allow in our food supply that are banned in other parts of the world, like most of the European nations. We use way more Roundup on our food supply than anywhere else in the world. There's multiple places in the world that won't accept our grain exports because of how toxic they are.
Well, even our makeup and skincare.
Yep. So everything from the food we eat to the products we use in our home every day to the soaps and stuff, these toxins get in. And then again, ultimately what happens is as your body's trying to cleanse and detox, it goes through this process where do we get rid of most of our toxins? They end up in our colon, right? Which is part of the gut. And so if we have this overabundance of toxins in our body, and that eventually ends up in our gut as it gets detoxed through the liver and so on and so forth, our gut has to deal with that. For whatever amount of time that it sits there, it's going to deal with that, and it's going to end up causing damage there. Now, the body's smart. It actually has a protective mechanism for this. What it will try to do in a lot of cases is take those toxins and push them into fat cells. Why? Because your fat cells act like an insulator, right? We know that, right? But we need a certain amount of body fat. Zero body fat would not be good. We wouldn't survive. So we need a certain percentage of body fat. And so our body's really smart. It'll say, hey, look, this is a toxin. This is dangerous. This isn't good. And if it doesn't know what else to do with it, because some of these synthetic chemicals, the body doesn't know how to process them very well. So it'll shove it into a fat cell. It'll get it pushed into a fat cell as an insulator. Well, if you know inside that fat cell, again, your body's brilliant. If it knows inside that fat cell is a bunch of harsh chemicals that are going to cause problems if they get released, what's the chances that your body's going to release that fat cell?
They're not going to.
That's called weight loss resistance.
Wow. Okay.
So now we've got, again, all of this stuff just piling up over and over and over again, right? And so these people come in and they've got a whole slew of problems oftentimes. And a lot of it traces back to the gut. They've got, again, potential weight loss resistance. They got metabolic dysfunction. They're not digesting food properly. They got nutrient deficiencies. They're chronically stressed. They've got chronic inflammation. They ache all over. My joints hurt. I have no idea. I went in, x-rays, this, that. There's no arthritis, etc. Or they go, oh, well, I've got arthritis in my right knee. And I'm like, yeah, but you said both of your knees hurt. Well, where'd the arthritis come from? I love this. My doc says it's old age. Well, how old's the other knee? It's the same age. So it can't be age. That's ridiculous. So we've got chronic aches and pains. We don't sleep well, right? Again, we've got anxiety and stress and focus issues because our neurotransmitters up. This is the world that so many people live in. And so if we're going to fix some of that, we've got to understand, and again, autoimmune or weak immune system or both, right? I've got an autoimmune condition and I've always got chronic colds and flus, right? These are the people that walk into my clinic all the time. And so if we're going to fix that, we've got to understand, right? We got to go really deep back to the basics. Yeah. If we don't heal the gut from the get-go, we're going to have problems. Now, healing the gut isn't a one-size-fits-all though either, because there can be a multitude of things. You can have leaky gut. You can have things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So you've got an overabundance of bad bacteria. So there's good bacteria and bad, right? And we need way more good bacteria than bad, but there's going to be some quote unquote bad bacteria in our system. That's normal. That's natural. Our body can deal with it. But when I talk about gut bacteria or bacteria in general in our society as sort of a turf war, right? So there's all this bacteria and a lot of it's good for us. The bacteria is not bad. Like this idea that we over sanitize, we give antibiotics.
The word bacteria as a whole is all bad.
All bacteria as a whole is not bad. But there's a turf where there's the good and the bad. Well, when you wipe out a majority of the bacteria, because we over sanitize, we antibiotics, we do all these things. Everybody's so worried about everything's got to be so clean. It's like when we were kids, I mean, we played on the floor all the time. I mean, we ate dirt. Like we literally would go outside and just play all day and just be filthy. And then we'd eat something without properly washing our hands. And now it's like your kid like drops his pacifier and it's like, oh, throw that one. I've watched this. Throw that one in the diaper bag, honey. Let's get a clean one out. We'll take that one home and sanitize it. I'm like, it hit the floor for 5 seconds.
What happened to the 5-second rule? I still live with the 5-second,
100%,
10-second rule.
100%. I dropped my fork the other day. I was at Bible study, I'm breakfast, and I dropped my fork and I picked it up off the floor real quick and I went back to eating and guy grabs it out of my hands like, you're not going to eat with that, are you? And he starts waving the waitress over and I took it back and I'm like, dude, it just hit the floor for half a second. Yeah. I'm like, this is me. You can relate with your family background. I'm like, I grew up dairy farming. I was milking cows and eating a ham sandwich at the same time.
I licked the cow's salt blocks.
Yeah.
Right now. Maybe that's what's wrong with me.
Right. I'm like, I was covered in filth and I would just eat and work at the same time and it was no big deal, but I have an amazing immune system. And so if we're going to start healing some of this stuff, we're going to start correcting our gut health. Number one, we've got to eliminate the junk. That's one of the biggest things for people. And so when you talk about like getting rid of the stuff that creates these gut problems, we've talked about it a little bit. It's like, you got to get rid of the seed oils. The refined vegetable oils, the seed oils are absolute garbage. There's zero nutritional value, highly inflammatory. So eliminating those and replacing them with good, healthy fats, the things we were intended to eat, things like real butter, coconut oil, avocados, avocado oil. Exactly. These are the things we should be using. And you've got a handful of options there. Every once in a while, someone comes in like, well, what about this or that? I'm like, they're like, what about African black walnut oil? I'm like, I don't know. I gave you 4 good ones to pick from. Okay. Like just use those. Keep it simple, stupid.
All the stores now carry avocado oil. That's what I go with.
and avocado oil is great because it has a high smoke point. So you can use it on high heat. You don't have to worry about that. You have to be a little careful with butter because you don't want to overheat it. So medium to low heat. Olive oil shouldn't really be heated at all. It should be used as a
and as you touch up on butter, real butter versus a lot of the stuff you find out vegetable oil.
Yeah,
most butter.
Yeah, all the margarines and stuff. People think that's butter. It's not. It's vegetable oil. It's refined vegetable oil.
Challenge. I think I believe I use Challenge a lot. Challenge is all the butter, isn't it?
That I'm not sure of.
Good, because if you're going to say no, I've been using this whole time thinking I'm right.
Come on, Aaron. We're going to have to get you back to a nutrition class. And so we use Kerrygold butter. I think they sell that just about everywhere. But if you're not sure, I mean, the biggest thing is learning to read labels. We do workshops and classes on that sort of
See,
stuff.
I moved to West Texas, and I used to
Right.
do Kerrygold.
They don't have it out there.
Challenges.
So there you go. So yeah, you just got to check the label. Like,
Yep.
what should be in butter? Cream and salt.
Yep,
Like,
that
that's
should be it.
That's all that should be there. And you get unsalted where it's just cream, right? And so just learning to look at your ingredients is huge. And that's true for everything. So we talked about a moment ago, I mentioned that the biggest source of calories in our society is vegetable oil. It's the number one source of calories. Well, it's not because we're cooking with it exclusively, but you go buy any sort of boxed product, prepackaged product off the shelf and flip it over, chances are there's some sort of seed oil in it. And this is even ones that we might think are a little bit better, like sunflower oil or safflower oil or things like this. Again, they're just so highly processed and refined. We were never intended to eat these things the way that we do. Now, you can eat sunflower seeds and you'll get a little bit of sunflower oil, but again, you're getting it in conjunction with all the other components, not highly refined and processed down and then added to whatever product is being made. So getting rid of the bad fats and replacing that with good is a huge one. The next thing is talking about restoring that good gut bacteria. And there's a handful of ways to do that. Good dairy is a good one. So again, good butter, raw yogurt, but you want full fat. We don't want to pull the good fat out. Again, we need it. It's crucial.
Whole milk versus like your 1%, which is just diluted.
Absolutely. Right. And ideally, if you can get a hold of it, if you can get raw milk or unpasteurized, unhomogenized, this sort of thing. Unhomogenized is huge because when you homogenize the fat, you destroy the chemical, the molecular structure. When you change the molecular structure, your body no longer recognizes it as food source. So that's a big one. Where was I going? That bacteria. So talking about good bacteria. So the other parts of getting good bacteria, fermented foods, things like sauerkraut, kimchi. Sauerkraut's a good one.
Kombucha.
Ancestry.
Love kombucha.
Love kombucha.
Chia seed's good too.
Chia is good. So there's a handful of ways where you can start to do that. And then, taking a good probiotic, of course, can be a good thing. But that in and of itself won't fix the problem, for a lot of people. If we're only, people come in, I got a digestive issue, I don't go to the bathroom enough. Which, side note, how do you know if you have gut problems? How often do you go to the bathroom? So many people go, do you have digestive issues? No. How often do you go number 2? Once every couple of days or something like that. I hear that all the time. I'm like, you should go at least once, ideally 2 or maybe even 3 times.
And I hear all the time, oh, that's just my normal. That might be your normal, but that's not normal.
But that's not normal. Right? Exactly. And so there's a lot of ways, bloating, gas, indigestion, these sorts of things. Or we see a lot of bouts of diarrhea and constipation. So people know they don't go as often as they should, but then they have well, why? Your body's smart. Eventually it's going to flush the system. And that's where you get this diarrhea for a couple of days, unexplained, no reason why. I didn't feel sick. I didn't have a cold or a flu or whatever, where you might associate, a bug, if you will, creating a digestive issue. You just flush the system and then you're back to normal. Your body's hoping that you can hit the reset button. Yep. So there's a lot of ways to know if that's there. Some people listening to this might think, I don't have digestive issues. And then they hear that and go, oh, wait.
I think we all do it at some point or another on one end of the scale. We all have some gut issues.
And we'll all fluctuate for sure. That's natural. Your body's adapting and responding to what's going on around it, right? And so it's a natural thing, like diarrhea. We talked about on the first one, like diarrhea, vomiting, fever, are these things good?
It's natural.
They're all good. It's your body's natural, innate response to something. What we want to do is minimize that stressor and support our body in getting back to normal as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
So getting good bacteria in is another important one. And then from there, like the last one that I would talk about with a lot of people is really neurological, right? We talked about the brain-gut connection. That's a two-way street. Ultimately, the gut gives a lot of feedback and important information to the brain, right? And to the immune system and so on. But there's the reality that what controls gut function is your brain, right? So if your brain isn't communicating back through the nerve system to the gut to tell it how to function and how to heal, then
and vice versa. Exactly. Yep.
And that's where your adjustments come in.
Absolutely. Well, this was a great show. We got a lot of information packed in a short time. And so maybe we'll do another extended show to cover it. So
yeah, for sure.
If you have questions based on this show or some other questions come up, please put them in the comments so then we can address them, and we can also possibly even do another show and touch up on the topics that you want to know. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.